I want to now drill down to some of the specifics, and because the minister is with us, he can break it down, because many people are reading and some are either alarmed and they are feeling they'll be paying down the line, or you're looking at the benefits as we've seen the city beginning to stabilize a bit more. And as Guta and co have said, confidence will come back. But let's start with some of the issues that most Ghanaians will identify with and need explanation. The first one is on page 10 of the program document that talks about containing the wage bill by limiting wage increases and hiring. I bring that up first because obviously, I mean, that Labour and TUC, has always warned that if the IMF program document comes and they see this one in it, Dr. Amin Adam, you are in trouble. So please take time to explain what this is in reality. What would this manifest in reality? How would this manifest in reality? Containing the wage bill by limiting wage increases and hiring. And the IMF says this will save you some 0.5% of GDP.
Look at the document and all the negotiations we have done. There is nowhere there is a statement that there is a freeze in employment. We are not going to do that. But this is not also different from what we have been doing. For the past 2 years, recruitment in the government side have focused on the security agencies and the teachers and then also nurses, etc., etc. And these are critical institutions, and the job they do also very critical to our development efforts. And you know that the recruitments are backed by financial clearance. That is when government is able to finance their wages, then the clearance is given. And so that will continue as and when we are able to do that. But there's no explicit decision that there will be a freeze in employment. And so to the extent that we are able to manage this recruitment and also the clearance, we should be able to contain the wage bill. Also, if you monitor over the last 2 years, recruitments into these sectors that I mentioned have been massive, have been unprecedented. Whether you are talking about the security agencies or you are talking about the health professionals and nurses and teachers, more than 2 million people have been recruited into these areas. And therefore, even if you are not able to recruit sooner, you should have the numbers that will be able to support these institutions and the development efforts of our country.
Okay, and those recruitments, I guess it's important to note, happened before the approval. Now going into post yesterday when you got the money, this is what you have to I guess stick by. So when it says continue by limiting wage increases, I mean you're limiting it. It doesn't say don't increase, but it says limit. How is government going to interpret that? If next year and definitely TUC will come and say we want to want more wages, and then it also says limit hiring. And I want an important clarity. The last time we went to the IMF, there was an exception created for essential services like the health sector and education in the limiting of the hiring. I wonder whether there's an agreement with the IMF going forward that whilst we are limiting hiring in the health and education sector, for example, there will be an exception such as we had in 2015.
You know that the wage negotiations are always done, by the social partners. And for this year's budget, the negotiations were done before even the budget was approved. And so when you budget, what we are going to prevent is to do extra budgetary spending. And so to the effect that there is need for more hiring for wage increases that are not budgeted, the social partners, I believe, will continue to cooperate with government so that we don't go off the budgetary target.
Okay. Dr. Chumesi, that's an important point for all workers, including yourself. So when you read that, you've heard the explanation. How do you assess this particular, I guess, program requirement that we'll have to meet to save us 0.5% of GDP?
Right. I think that this conditionality is not new. It's always been under almost all our IMF programs. The reason being that the wage bill takes a significant chunk of government resources. And so for that matter, whenever we are able to control the rate of growth in the wage bill, then possibly some resources can be saved. But for me, like you rightly said, most of the times exceptions need to be made, particularly in critical areas such as health and education. You would want to make exception to replace, for example, retiring labor, to make sure that there are no deficits created in critical sectors. And I think that that is something that is done under usually most IMF programs, but you would not find a wholesale employment into the security services and others when we are under a program, because you need to contain the wage bill. And you do that by either containing salaries that people are taking or by reducing the number that is being
I know you're smiling, so I was wondering, I mean,
yes,
you know it will affect you, you know.
I know, essentially I am, because we are also dealing with the situation of high inflation. So you see, in essence,
how do you balance that?
Exactly. Labor, it's really in a precarious position, in a sense that as prices are increasing, your real wage, at the end of the day, how much your salary affords you now is just about a half of what it used to do. And I understand why labor union would be up in arms in trying to find out the clear position of government. But the reality is that, yes, I mean, IMF programs have always come with a lot of negative impact on the ordinary Ghanaian, the ordinary worker and all that. And for me, my position is that that is what we need to learn, important lessons, so that periodically we do not find ourselves back here, because we find that the cycle is always about 4 years maximum. We are back looking for a deal. We need to find sustainable solutions to this, so that we do not over time keep inflicting such difficult economic circumstances on the citizens.
I mean, John, this is standard IMF conditionality, right? I mean, you had a version of it in 2015, so I'm not sure you have a problem with this. Everybody expected this will be in it.
You see, the reality is that workers are going to struggle. Living conditions are going to be tough. And so let's not play around it and say it's the usual thing. It's not the usual thing. If you read the document very well, it's quantitative. It says 0.5% of GDP. So it's a target that you ought to meet. Capital expenditure, 0.9%. It's providing around 0.9% of GDP of savings. Rationalization, goods and services spending, 0.3% of GDP. So these are quantitative targets that the IMF will be measuring. And the statement goes further to say that when you do not meet it, in the media review, you must take steps to reflect those variances in order to come back. So let nobody present it to us as if it's the normal way of doing things. And I've been hearing these 2 million jobs, 2 million jobs. I don't know what that means. I have the budget here. And the budget for me is the most authentic document for me. If you go to page 230, Appendix 7, 2023, total government budget ceiling, staff strength, 804,000. It is there. It is in the budget. It's not a political statement. And the budget is debated and adopted. This is what both sides of the House, the entire House, adopted. 804,000 total staff strength. I don't know where this 2 million is coming from. 2 million of what? Is it gross figures? Is it current employment? Is it what? The current total staff strength, the ceiling, that's the 2023 ceiling. Government says that even if it employs so much, it has to end at 804,000. So look, let's not create this impression as if this IMF program is going to lessen so much of a burden. Rather, we have to take some tough, difficult decisions for the next 3 years. The question is, how do we navigate this very difficult path? I think that should be the narrative that should be the discussion. And Dr. Tio Champon is enumerated some of the difficult things that the IMF expects us to undertake before the next tranche is released. So it's like they've given you some palliative care, whatever you choose to call it, to tame your temperature, but you must take those very difficult and tough decisions.
One of them, and I want